who better to talk when it comes to Cincinnati Bengals football than James Rapien. James, are you at home? You heading to practice? What are you up to? Little of both?
Yeah, at home right now. Got my morning Joe Burrow-esque workout in this morning, and then, we'll be off to practice.
What is a Joe Burrow-esque workout?
No, I was just kidding. Because
I need it. I mean, I'm getting fatter by the day, and I work out every day, and I got to mix up something because that waistline is not good.
It's tough in season with all the traveling, and so last year after the Super Bowl run, I stepped on the scale and it wasn't good. So trying to be more consistent this year.
All right, before we go any further, where can everybody find you and everything you have going on about the Cincinnati Bengals?
Allbengals.com is really a one-stop shop, whether you're looking for video or articles or anything in between. And then Cincinnati Bengals Talk right here on YouTube, and the Locked On Bengals podcast, which is also on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Paul Fritzner has something to ask you before we get going here. Paul?
Hey, James, I got a quick question for you. I'm having Russ Heltman on my show, on my gambling show later today. Is there anything I need to know to ask him at 2 o'clock?
To ask him? No, he's going to be ready to go. You want to talk Bearcats with him? He'll be ready. Certainly Bengals as well. Russ is a good dude, and he'll be prepared. He'll be a good one to have on.
Who is Russ?
He works with James on everything with all Bearcats and all Bengals and everything.
Make sure we let our audience know in case they want to find out what's happening. James, we were just talking a second ago. Jamar Chase, a hip injury of some kind. I would imagine it looks like he will play on Sunday. How serious is the injury?
We'll find out more today. And it's one of those things, when did the injury occur? Is it something that, he's just sore from Sunday? Did he get nicked up in practice? Because during the open part of Wednesday's practice, he looked fine. So we'll certainly know more today. That's one of those unique ones where, did it happen mid-practice? Did it happen on Sunday? If it happened on Sunday, I would agree with you. I think he would be on track to play. If it happened in practice, it's more of a question mark and the severity and all of those things. So that'll be something I'm certainly monitoring, and we'll be monitoring when we walk out to practice later today.
I think it's fair to say that the Atlanta Falcons are a bit of a surprise. Matt Ryan leaves after so many great years there. He's now in Indianapolis. Marcus Mariota. A lot of people thought that maybe by this point in the season he would not be the starter, that Desmond Ridder perhaps would have taken over from a former UC Bearcat great. But last week, Mariota throws the ball 14 times. He hits 13 out of 14, but they run the ball like crazy. Now, the Bengals defense has been great. Haven't allowed a second-half touchdown in the last 6 weeks. First time that's happened in 20-plus years in the NFL. But they have been a little bit susceptible to the run. Is that concern number one for the Bengals defense going into this game?
No doubt about it. Because it's the perfect storm. You're going up against some run-heavy teams starting this week with Atlanta, and you don't have DJ Reader. And you probably won't have Logan Wilson, even though he hasn't been ruled out for this week. It just feels really optimistic to expect him back. Who knows? Jonah Williams came back much quicker than I thought. I thought he was going to miss time, and he played last week. So we'll see. But not having DJ Reader in this matchup, and then you also lose Josh Tupou for this matchup, and suddenly that interior of your defensive line is susceptible, and you don't have a true nose tackle on the 53-man roster. I assume it's going to be Tyler Shelvin, since they didn't sign anyone. I thought maybe they would look to go that route, and maybe they just don't think there's anyone out there that can help them instantly. You're not going to have DJ Reader back this week, regardless of how he's feeling, even though I do think he's moving in the right direction. So, yeah, finding ways to slow down this Falcons rushing attack, that is goal number 1 and 2 for this Bengals defense, outside of, forcing turnovers, of course.
When you mention some of the guys who are going to step in there and play, for the fans at home watching, familiarize us with a couple of names that maybe we haven't talked about, heard a lot about, that are trying to replace those guys on the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, so the interior of the defensive line could be pretty unique. So we know about B.J. Hill. He signed the big contract this past offseason. He'll be one of the starters on that interior. And then after that, I mean, it could be a mixed bag. I mean, you could see them go with a Tyler Shelvin, or you could see a platoon of Joseph Osai. Maybe they promote Khalid Kareem, defensive end from the practice squad, and go that route where you're putting in some hybrid guys that play end usually, but can also play on the inside. Cam Sample is another name to watch there. So there are a bunch of guys that could play that spot, at least some. Zach Carter, third-round rookie as well. So you have bodies, but none of those guys are a nose tackle. None of those guys are eating up the space that you expect, a Reader or even a Josh Tupou to eat up. And so that's why I mentioned Tyler Shelvin on the practice squad. He's a second-year player, was a fourth-round pick. Has been a disappointment up to this point. There's no denying that. But sometimes you need space eaters, and he certainly takes up a lot of space, and this would be an opportunity for him to show the Bengals and the rest of the NFL that he's not a lost cause, that he is developing, and that he can make plays. So we'll see if they go that route. That's what I think they're going to do, but we won't truly find out until they make a move on Saturday.
Is the Atlanta run game, you've got a guy in Mariota who, when he was in college, he was extremely mobile. He's taken more than his fair share of hits through the years. Is this a run game that is more the power run game coming at you right between the tackles, or are they doing a lot of RPO stuff and stretching the field?
It's unique because I think that, you look at their offense and it's got little pieces of the Tennessee playbook when Marcus was there with Arthur Smith. It's got little pieces of other places across the league. And so they do both. And that's what makes it tough is they're comfortable running from behind. You might hear a lot about game script this week, but I was talking with Aaron Freeman, who does a good job on Locked On Falcons. And he's like, look, they've been down by 3 scores to the Buccaneers, to the Rams, and they still run it. And depending on how the game goes, they could go to that power run game, or they could go the RPO style, but it's going to be a run-heavy game plan, especially this week, given the Bengals' injury issues. And so it's tough because it's one thing to ramp up and get excited and get psyched up for that in the first quarter, but that does take a toll in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter. And then that's when it makes it tough, especially when you're short on bodies to stop the run. So, it's a unique challenge. It's a different challenge for Lou Anarumo's defense this week. And it's going to be interesting to see how they hold up against a Falcons team that, honestly, they have to be flying high right now after beating the 49ers, because I did not see that coming, and they were pretty dominant in that win.
Yes, they were. Let's flip the script. Bengals on offense. We talked about Chase. We'll see on that. How's T. Higgins coming along? Better?
Yeah, I think so. He made it out of the game on Sunday, which was certainly the concern after week 5 when he does play and he is activated. And, well, he didn't play much, right? 10 snaps, I think it was, or something in that range, and couldn't return in the second half in a tight game. So he made it through without re-aggravating that ankle. And so now it's about rest and maintenance. He was limited on Wednesday, and so I expect him to play this week. And you just hope that he's a young guy, he's 23. You hope it just heals with time, and he can play through this. And, I don't think he was 100% last week by any stretch against the Saints, but he still made some plays. And learning to play through injury, you talk to current NFL players, former NFL players, you have to learn how to do that. And he's dealt with a lot of little nicks, especially this year. And we're only in week 7. And he's played through most of them. So I expect T to be able to play on Sunday, and hopefully he'll be even closer to 100% than he was last week against the Saints.
I got to ask you, James, because in every sport you see this kind of thing where the player clearly wants to play. The organization wants the player to play. But is this thing with Higgins, especially the ankle, and look, he took a couple of huge hits to the head early in the season, had a concussion. We know that. He has missed some time in games this year. But is this a kind of injury with an ankle? And you hear the same things about a hamstring or a groin or whatever it might be. Do you think that this is a kind of thing that lingers all year long unless he just gets a week or 2 off?
I don't necessarily think so. Part of that is his age. It's not like we're talking about, AJ Green present day or Julio Jones, where if you get nicked up, it's just going to take a little bit longer to heal. And I think the other element of it to me is, this coaching staff and how good they are of, all right, let's just sit him. And they sat him last Wednesday. They sat him last Thursday. And he goes out there for a walkthrough on Friday and is still able to play. And the same thing with Jonah Williams. I mean, Jonah Williams wasn't even on the injury report this week after last week and all the uncertainty with him, or at least yesterday he wasn't. So to me, that's the element of this, is this coaching staff is going to give him the weekly maintenance needed to make sure he's good to go on Sunday. But, that bye week after these next 3 games is certainly going to be important for a lot of these guys as these injuries start to pile up for the Bengals.
Now, yesterday on the injury report, we noted in the open that the Falcons have 4 defensive starters that were limited in practice yesterday. We did point out limited doesn't mean out, at least not yet. What do you suspect the game plan, whether those guys are playing or not playing, what do you suspect the game plan is offensively for the Bengals in this game, knowing what we know about Atlanta's defense?
Contain Grady Jarrett and make sure he does not wreck the game, and for those who don't know who Grady Jarrett is, he's a defensive tackle for the Falcons. He's having a great year. He's the guy who sacked Brady and got called for the roughing the passer call late in the game a couple of weeks ago, and that obviously got a lot of attention. So just for those wondering, a Geno Atkins-like player where he's not he's like body comparable to Geno Atkins as far as size goes and can make that sort of impact. I'm not saying he's Geno Atkins, but he certainly can make that type of impact. And so we saw it early in the season, right? You let guys like TJ Watt and Micah Parsons kind of wreck your offense. You can't let this guy do it. And I think Cordell Volson is going to see plenty of him. Grady Jarrett moves across that defensive line. And so why would you not put him up against the 4th-round rookie? The good news is Alex Kappa, the Bengals right guard, is used to seeing him in that NFC South. He came from the Buccaneers, so that helps. And I think this offensive line is playing better, so it's going to be a good test. But when you look at the path for this Bengals offense to take a step backwards and struggle on Sunday, I mean, they're at home. Their offensive line is playing as well as it's played. The run game has been efficient. They haven't ran for a ton of yards overall, but I think it's been more efficient in recent weeks. So they're feeling pretty good about themselves. And so as long as you don't let Grady Jarrett wreck things, I think this offense should continue to move forward and should continue to score points.
One guy along that offensive line, and look, I don't care what town you live in, when you bring in a guy who's a big-name guy and, he goes through some of the things, and we're talking about Collins here for a second. A lot of fans, based on the first 2 games, when they allowed 13 sacks and really did not run the ball effectively in either of those 2 games, everybody jumps on the bandwagon and says, we got to run this guy out of town. What are your impressions on Collins? Is he like the rest of the line getting better? He's had to deal with a back situation going all the way back to training camp, had very little contact during training camp, and when he did, it was ugly when the Rams came in. How's he playing right now?
Better. I think he had his best game as a Bengal on Sunday, had really some really good reps against Cam Jordan, who's a high-end talent and certainly one of the better pass rushers in this league. And so is he where you were hoping he would be when they signed him back in March, when people were chasing him around Kenwood Town Center? Not yet, but he's getting there. And I think that just going back to the T. Higgins and this coaching staff being good at maintaining these players and giving them the rest needed, he's had Wednesdays off. And, he's younger than me. He's 29 years old. But guess what? Maybe that's what you need to do to get the most out of him on game day. And so if that's the case, give him those days off. And it's certainly helping. I think he doesn't look as stiff, which would make sense with the back, assuming it's getting better. And I think it is. And I think he's just getting more comfortable on a new team. So La'el Collins has been much better in recent weeks, and I expect him to continue to improve. And, I know there's confidence there in him. And look, he took a lot of heat because there's high expectations, and some of that heat was certainly deserved. But if he continues to improve, I think people will come around on the bodyguard, as people call him and also have poked fun at since he nicknamed himself that.
Well, I hope so, because I think sometimes, and look, I've been guilty of it in the past. I think sometimes guys get off, to a bad start, and then you're ready to throw in the towel on the guy for the rest of the year. And in the National Football League, with now 17 games, that is a mistake, especially with a guy who has a track record. All right, before we let you go, and I know you're off to practice, you have any prediction, James Rapien, for this game, Falcons v. Bengals on Sunday?
This is a swing game. That's really going to tell us a lot about the Bengals and where they are as a team. Are they one of these middle-of-the-road teams that is going to hover around 500 for most of the season and you hope wins, like last year, and then you hope wins a couple of games in December and early January, could sneak into the playoffs? Maybe they are, or maybe they're the team that everyone in Cincinnati, or most people in Cincinnati, thought they could be. And so if you can come back home, handle business against the Falcons, get to 4-3, I think it could kind of dictate where you're going here with 2 more games ahead of the bye. So I think it's a big game. And I look at this matchup, and as good as the Falcons have played, and they've certainly impressed me and exceeded my expectations, this is a game the Bengals should win. I think they do win it. It's going to be closer than people anticipate. I think the Bengals open as like a 6.5-point favorite, and the line dropped to like 6 or 5.5, depending on where you look. I would take those points, but I'm also taking the Bengals 27-23. The defense isn't great. They get beat up a little bit by the run, but the offense does enough, and the Bengals get a win on Sunday.
All right. James Rapien, we thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Yeah, it's nice not to be traveling this week, Thom. Home sweet home. I'll talk to you next week.
Although you're going up to your old stomping ground next week. You're going to be in
Can't wait for that either.
Cleveland, Ohio on Monday Night Football. That scene is going to be incredible. Even though the Browns stink, they can do some things that can hurt you, and that's going to be a fun game next week.
It is, no doubt about it. And you want to talk about rushing attacks. They might have the best rushing attack in the NFL. So
when they run
can't
the
stop
ball,
the Falcons run, then.
Well, I mean, when they run the ball,
when they run the ball.
I mean, that's the thing. We sit here every week, and I just scratch my head. I mean, I've been around Kevin Stefanski a lot of times when he was an offensive coordinator, and people may not remember, but when he was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota, Mike Zimmer, the head coach, kept wondering, why in the world are we not running the ball more? And Zim started to sort of dictate. He wasn't play calling, but from a philosophical standpoint, he kept saying, hey, look, we got to run the ball more. I just don't understand, and I know we're branching off on Cleveland before we let you go, but I just can't understand how you can look your team in the eye week in and week out and throw the ball with Jacoby Brissett 35 times in a game, and you're only running the ball 15 or 17 times in a game with Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I don't get it.
And it's not just Jacoby Brissett either. You look at those weapons. David Njoku is a good player, and Amari Cooper is a good player, but that's about it. And there's not enough there to when you look at the running backs, which is probably the best 1-2 running back combo in the NFL, talent-wise at least, versus the wide receiver. So, no, I agree with you, and I think it will be a run-heavy attack against this Bengals team, especially if they're without Logan Wilson and or DJ Reader.
Well, first things first for Cleveland. They're taking on Baltimore this weekend, and we know about that rivalry, and the Bengals get them next week, but they got to worry about Atlanta. James, thank you. Have a great day.
Of course. You too.
James Rapien, kind enough to join us. He'll be off to the Bengals practice.